Hey Jabbers, we are back this week and we have a new guest. Her name is Jen Ottman, and she is a California-based therapist who works with individuals and couples navigating relationship stress, communication challenges, and major life transitions. She helps people understand the emotional patterns that shape their relationships and approach difficult moments with more awareness and attention. Or sorry, and I gotta read that over. She helps people understand the emotional patterns that shape their relationships and approach difficult moments with more awareness and intention. After recently planning her own wedding, Jen developed a deeper appreciation for how weddings can bring up family dynamics, expectations, and stress in ways couples don't always anticipate. She helps couples approach these moments with curiosity and honesty while protecting the relationship, not just the event. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah,
Let's,
we're excited to dive in. I think we wanted to bring a therapist on for a while because Gabby and I talk a lot about how sometimes we're the default therapist in a relationship with our clients and we are not qualified at all. So I think it'll be fun to just like chat about things from your perspective and like how we as wedding pros can sort of navigate this, and also for any couples that might be listening, how they can navigate this chapter of their life as well.
yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a big undertaking to be, the people that your clients go to with the emotional stuff. I feel like in my own wedding planning, definitely had a lot of different people to lean on, but it was really vulnerable stuff that I had to talk about, and not everyone is necessarily a safe space for that. And so navigating that, and you're there and talking about all the things. So I can imagine it would that type of stuff would pop up. Absolutely. And yeah,
Well, and I
it's emotional.
I do think it makes us also, this will be interesting because we may come out of it with a little bit more empathy for our
Mhm.
couples. For us, it is a job and it's hard to feel emotions all the time. So perhaps we do have a little bit of a barrier up and to protect ourselves. And so when emotions are happening with our clients, I'm saying we, but maybe it's just me. I kind of roll through it a little bit in a robotic way, being like, oh, I'm so sorry. How can I help? But I'm not feeling that per se. I'm
Mhm.
like, let's go. Like, why are you struggling right now? We've got to get through this. But I could probably be a little bit more kind, and I should, this will be fun to hear what your journey was as a bride and also how this kind of came about. And maybe that's where we jump in and just telling us, like, how did you become a therapist?
Yeah, yeah. And you bring up a lot of good points there. Because I mean, just to kind of address what you first said, that you can't really like logistically have that emotional connection with each client. That would be so exhausting. And so that boundary is probably, yeah, like you said, it's something protective, to not overinvest. And yeah, that's not always something I mean, definitely not something you guys need to manage, but yeah, there is this, I'm sure you guys get the brunt of it, the people being more reactive or whatever, and it's probably coming from some deeper place. Not that that's your thing to just always empathize with, but most likely it is. But yeah, I became a therapist. My mom and my sister are both therapists, so that's important context.
Yeah.
But so it's always been in my repertoire going to therapy. I went to therapy when I was younger, when my parents got divorced, and then did kind of off and on throughout my whole life. In high school, I was having some, OCD like tendencies that were showing up. And so I went for that. And it's always been a really important resource for me. Um, and I worked in a corporate world, corporate environment for, 5 or 6 years out of undergrad, and just was not finding my fit and not feeling really passionate about it. But one thing I have always been passionate about and really curious about is just human behavior and people's stories, and feeling like I am a pretty empathetic, understanding person. And it's something I'm just drawn to, is yeah, connecting with people in that deeper way. Surface conversations are typically more challenging for me. Um, And yeah, it's always been like in the back of my mind. I knew that was a possible career opportunity, which I think is a huge part of how people, decide their careers is like what has been, what have they been privy to? Like what are these options? And so
Mhm.
I I signed or I applied for grad school and just went for it. And I'm so happy that I'm here. And yeah, finally have found like I have my fit when I really didn't have that before.
That's awesome. I think going back to Gabby's point about we kind of move through it robotically, I feel like I'm an empathetic person, but I also feel like it helps me to calm them down because I'm not invested in it, which I imagine is maybe a strength of a therapist because you're not like maybe deeply feeling every client's issues and problems, but you can look at it objectively. And I feel like that, like, my calm manner helps clients to be like, everything's going to be okay because I'm not like invested in whatever the relationship is going wrong with the mom or the brother or whatever. Like, I can help them navigate that without being emotional about it myself.
Yeah, I mean that's huge. And when they probably do talk to their mom or whoever, the energy is matched. Like that stressful energy, maybe it's on different things, but maybe there is that stressful energy that's building. And I mean, that's a huge part of just the therapy process in general and how it can be really impactful for people is the steady, consistent presence that people can count on. And you can, have that different perspective that you maybe haven't been able to see before because you're so just in it and it feels overwhelming. And yeah,
Yeah.
that is a strength, I'd say.
So, Jen, you got married not that long ago, and I know you had kind of mentioned to me it was somewhat of like a stressful process, or like things came up for you that you didn't anticipate. But I'm curious, what do you feel like going through that process? What do you feel like you wish more couples knew once they get engaged and going into the wedding planning experience?
Yeah, I think I knew it was going to be stressful because there's a lot to plan. There's a lot of factors and there's a ton of things to consider. So I knew I was going to be challenged with that, just the weight of it all. It's a big event, it's a big project, it's a lot of money and all the things. But I don't think I realized like how emotionally tolling it was going to be. It's not just a logistical challenge. I think it's an emotional one as well that brought up a lot of family dynamics and, money conversations and relationship questions in ways that I didn't really anticipate. And I personally knew that I guess there was part of me that did know. I knew that my wedding day would be emotional. Just my parents are divorced and they have been since I was two, and they don't particularly get along, and they haven't since I was growing up. And that was always a really challenging thing for me to navigate. And so I knew that like this is going to be an event where they're going to be connected, they're going to be both be there, but they're
Hmm.
also we're going to be like collaborating in some way. And that really stressed me out. And I think that I have done a lot of work on that, and it brought up a lot of feelings in ways that I didn't quite expect. And that was really hard because that took a lot of my focus during the planning and the wedding, frankly, itself. I know they would both be disappointed and probably sad to hear that. But it's the reality, I think, of the situation. And when you come from somewhere that has these complex family dynamics, that these bigger events where families are merged or where you're making decisions or where there's just events where both parties or people from different angles want to be involved. It's hard to merge it when it hasn't been cohesive or,
Right.
you know,
It's
calm in
like
the
not the
past.
time you want to bring up the subjects
Yeah.
that haven't really been touched in years, but it kind of is like, oh, we need to navigate this new scenario without having to like dive deep into family history or trauma or, relationship issues.
Yeah. And that's something I think, personally, uh, I was grateful for in a lot of ways. Like it forced me to have certain conversations with people that my dad, that were really needed, and it forced us to kind of grow in this different direction and be more, at least me, like be more transparent. So that was a really nice thing, but it wasn't how I wanted to spend my time. And then I think, planning, I didn't want that to be a big part of it, but also, with friendships too, I think that can come about, and that's something I work with people on is like, is this something that needs to be addressed, or is this something that you kind of have catastrophized in your mind and now it's gotten to this place where it feels like it's this huge thing? Is that actually something you need to exert your energy on, or is that something we can kind of resolve internally and put over here, at least for now? Or if you want to have the conversation, great, but you don't need to resolve all of this stuff, in this period. But because it can bring about a lot of that, like it puts a shining light on where there's some disconnection or disappointment and all that.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I would think the just knowing it's going to be emotional, but there are logistical challenges as well. There was we planned our wedding, that picked a date, booked so many, like most of the vendors, I think all of them, almost all of them. And then about 4 months in, a music festival was announced, like that was going to be that weekend. And it's a town in Montana where the wedding was held, and so there's not a ton of resources as far as rental cars and hotel availability and all the
Mm.
things. And so, yeah, we had to move the wedding because I wasn't about to have
Gosh.
that be overrun. And thankfully, everybody was available except aside from the DJ the following weekend. But yeah, it was, there's those two. So I
Yeah.
think.
Well, something you said that I think about a lot in conversations that we've had with clients too, and also I think back to my wedding, is sometimes in your head you are catastrophizing something that doesn't actually come to fruition. And
Mhm.
that's a fine line too, is yes, there's tough conversations that need to be had during the wedding planning process. Stuff is coming up. So have them as they come, or have them in anticipation of avoiding situations. But also, don't always go to worst case scenario, at least in my opinion, because that might not even happen. And I think specifically about like divorced parents, if they can just zip it for a day and realize it's not about them, and just to be civil in a wedding, situation. I've had a lot of clients that have been really nervous about that part of it, and we've done everything in our power on the back end to say, great, well, they're at two separate ends of the room, but
Mhm.
they're going to see each other. They're going to be there. I was like, just try not to stress about it. And actually, something similar happened at our wedding. My husband and I both have divorced parents. Mine are on great terms. His have never really been. And on the wedding day, so I had purposely put my mother-in-law and my father-in-law at two very different tables, but my mother-in-law didn't have a lot of family, or had no family here. She's from Thailand. And so I put her with my family. But as the day progressed, the father's side of the family, the aunts, his sister, like that group, in fact, invited his mother over to sit at their table. And the dad was there, and she was there, and aunts and uncles were there that all had a relationship with her previously, because, they were married
Mhm.
for some time. And so it was really great. I didn't even notice it. As the bride, I was out in my own world of other things happening, and I'm glad it wasn't a big deal. All they had to do was change place cards, so I don't care about that. But it really worked out nicely. And so I say that only if someone's listening and has a lot of anxiety about it, it's possible that it actually works better than what you're imagining it.
Yeah, that's so sweet that that happened.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, that's a big part of it is like letting things surprise you, You don't have to, you don't have to have like such a tight grip on some of these things to make sure that, no fuss is caused. There's probably certain things that you can pinpoint that, yeah, you need to have some oversight on, but something like that is, yeah, if you tried to control it, or your husband tried to control it and saw that happening and freaked out and whatever, and maybe tried to get in there to mitigate or to help something that didn't need to be helped, that wouldn't have happened. And yeah, there's an element of letting people surprise you, and if not feeling like you need to set a big boundary or, you know, uninvite someone because they wronged you in some way. But see
Mhm.
how things unfold if you are willing to have the patience for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Letting them be mature adults, and it
Right?
paid off.
God
Yeah.
forbid. Yeah. Okay, Jen, so we're, I guess, thinking also to us planners, where do you see some of the big emotional landmines, I guess, when we probably assume that it's going to be something about like stress of planning a wedding, money, maybe family expectations, like we've talked about. But how can planners specifically recognize these things early and maybe help to de-escalate the situation, even though we're not trained? We're not trained professionals. So what is it that we can do as regular people that are working hand in hand with these couples for 12 plus months to help them alleviate those stresses a little bit?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's not your job to, oh, this is something triggering for my clients, so I'm going to avoid, sending that email in that way and like worry about that so much. Um, but these things are just exactly so inevitable. They are going to come up. They may not come up with certain people, maybe. I don't know. I don't know who, I've never known anybody to not have one of these at least come up. The money process, the money stuff, the dynamics with your family, and just general stress because of how big of a deal this can be, and usually is. But I think I think laying some of that out on the table, like being a bit proactive about it, would probably, um, you know, be helpful to clients, your guys' clients, to normalize some of it. Like these are some things that are probably going to come up. You know, are you asking, inquiring? Are you guys having, budget conversations? Have I noticed, your parents are divorced? Have you talked to them? Do you know what's going to happen there? Walking down the aisle, or where they're not where they're going to be seating, but how that's going to work out. Like, not necessarily that's something for you guys to work through with them, but say like, hey, these are some things that are probably going to come up, and it's probably going to be a big emotional toll. And I think it might be nice if you and your partner start discussing these things early on, because you guys are that first point of, most likely the first point of contact, and like a professional relationship in the wedding planning process. Like they hire you and then they do everything else. Maybe they've picked a location, maybe, but probably they're like, yeah, I have a couple of options. Let's explore some of the venues there and then, go from there. But that I didn't know what I was doing when it came to like starting the process. And I didn't know what to expect. So I think if you can lay that down in a really, you know, supportive way, not that it's your job to help them navigate, but to say like, hey, these are some of the things that are probably going to come up. And I would start thinking about them with your partner. And the more you guys can connect over this and talk to each other, consistently about it, the better. And if you do end up, needing resources in some way, like I don't know, a budgeting, a spreadsheet, or I don't know if that's something you guys provide or if that's something they do on their own, but like those little resources, like I share them, I have them, and, you know, let me know what you need to help support that without it being, your role.
I love that approach of like kind of proactively being like, even if it's like, hey, here are some things that are you might expect throughout the process, and like how to approach like having those conversations early. I think one of the things, even for me, early on, I have a questionnaire and I ask people like, are there any other decision makers? But I feel like it'd be nice to ask a few more personal questions, because a lot of times I don't ask about family dynamics until like closer to the wedding. Like, is there anything I need to be aware of? And that's mostly for me to be prepared on the day of like meeting these additional people. But maybe that's a question in the early process of like, anything to be aware of? Because I do think that can help navigate, like if they're like, I have a tricky relationship with my mom, but she's going to be kind of involved, it might, I think having that knowledge as the professional is helpful to just proactively plan.
Hmm.
Yeah, totally. I mean it's so ingrained, it's so part of it, at least for the person and for you guys. Like you might receive a rogue email from one of the family members that's requesting something and it's like, what, where is this coming from? I don't really understand it. So if that dialogue can exist and just be open, I think especially knowing that like as a person with this dynamic in my family and my husband also, having more of his parents have been married for I don't even know how long, but and comes from a really big family and is just more like traditional in that sense. Um, I felt really like bad about myself, I think,
Mm.
because I do I have some stuff, I have some baggage in that way. And so if there's some normalizing of it in the earlier stages, I think that can be really helpful. And that's something I try to work with people on is that this stress that you're feeling is normal. It's not great. It's really uncomfortable, but this is a big deal and we can work on trying to mitigate some of that, but it's not because something's wrong with you guys or your family.
Yeah. And I mean, I know as Gabby and I said, we often, as planners, become the de facto therapist, like listening to conflicts, venting sessions from couples, sometimes emotional outbursts. Like it can really vary on how couples, I think they lean on us or just kind of spill to us because it feels like a safe space. We're a third party. We don't really know the family. And like Gabby said, sometimes it's like we can take that on without carrying the weight of it. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on having healthy boundaries and how we can enforce that with clients without losing rapport or them feeling like they can just spill it to us and like be a safe space for that and like a listening ear.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that's hard because the relationship you're building is important. And I'm sure there's certain clients, maybe, you know, I don't know if it's all of them, but certain ones you probably have a soft spot for or where those boundaries get even further blurred. But kind of similar to like normalizing of it, I think there is a lot of power in validation, and letting some clients be heard when they feel overwhelmed and just validating their experience. But when that trickles into this conversation, is derailed and we were supposed to be talking about something else, and I'm checking my watch and we're way over time and I don't really know how to get them off the phone. Um, Boundaries, make our relationships feel more safe and effective. And in therapy, we talk about something called the container, and that's like basically the structure of the relationship, the time boundaries and role clarities and all those things. And I think that probably translates to you guys in a certain way as well. Like structure is what actually makes people feel safer in some ways. And so if like I said, like I have a meeting where you're supposed to be talking about floral arrangements and confirming those details turns into like an hour about bridesmaids drama. Like it may feel supportive for them in the moment, and it may actually feel really cathartic, but it can make that role where in your guys' relationship a bit less clear. And so I think there's a really, fine balance, and it's probably an art form that, is something to be developed and worked on. But if you can balance some of the like validation while also redirecting the conversation and getting things done, because that's also really important to the client. Like knocking some of these things off their list, not having to think about them and having things confirmed is also going to be extremely supportive and take a big burden off of them. But they're
Mhm.
just maybe all their stress is being projected onto the bridesmaids drama, and that's like something they can hyper focus on. They can get, whatever it is. But saying like, sounds so stressful. Like, why don't we finalize some of these things that we need to finalize today? So there's one less thing on your plate.
Mhm.
Um, and validating, yeah, that sounds crazy or whatever, but not allowing it to blur the rest of what you're there to do. Because I
I
think you can still have a good relationship without it being like you're the punching bag.
I think what
Right.
I'm going to start saying now is like, that sounds really hard. Here's Jen's number. Please go talk to
Yeah.
her about that. And then let's get back to booking your rentals.
Yeah. I mean,
Don't
it's
take offense that I'm suggesting therapy for you, but
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's if they don't have someone too, if they can't talk to sometimes you can't talk to your mom or your parent. Like
Right.
there were some hard things for me to talk to my parents about, and oftentimes everyone, every person has a landmine in its own of a topic that you're probably going to hit. So, yeah, a third party therapy can be really helpful, and it doesn't mean, again, something's wrong, but
yeah.
you may need an outside perspective that doesn't cause friction within your guys's.
Yeah, and I
I
think
think
we need
it's
to, I was saying, we need to be sure, we need to develop our boundary skills and really, because I do think it can go on and it can start sucking our energy and it can start putting a strain on that client relationship because we're dreading the next conversation where they're just going to be negative about this situation that's out of our hands. And we don't necessarily know how to put a stop on it. But I think, like you said, more so redirecting, validating their feelings, saying, "Oh, yeah, that's a tough situation to be in. The good news is we're going to take care of this rental piece. That'll be one thing less on your plate, and then you can go talk to your friends about it, or go talk to your therapist about, it, or whatever the case may be." But yeah, that can be a heavy weight to bear, and I think it's very hard for us because we are being paid by them, but we're not being paid as a therapist by
Mm.
them. We are professional event planners. And so finding words for us to put our boundaries up is probably what I need to talk to ChatGPT about.
Yeah. Yeah, I can help you with some transitional phrases.
Oh, yes.
yeah.
But I think, yeah, that's a good point because you might start to avoid wanting to call them or like have the
Right.
conversation, and they are paying you, but they're not, like you're saying, they're not paying you for this one 45-minute, event session plus a 45-minute actual planning session when we've all
Yeah.
calmed down. Um, it's your time as well, but I get how it's really hard to venture into those boundaries when maybe it feels super uncomfortable because it does
Hmm.
inevitably feel sometimes uncomfortable when
Hmm.
putting up a boundary.
Yeah.
Carrie, were you going to say something before I jump into the next?
I lost my train of thought, so it's
Okay,
okay.
sorry.
No, it wasn't a big deal.
Okay. Okay, now when a couple is feeling overwhelmed and they're, I guess, defaulting to kind of fight or flight anxiety, and sometimes it can come off as abrasive or they're being rude. And like you said at the beginning of the episode, like it's obviously things are happening at a deeper level. They're not, unless we really messed up, they're unlikely personally mad at us. So, what are maybe a few communication techniques or grounding techniques that you would recommend planners can use in like a very heated moment of tension?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends where, I guess it doesn't depend where the anger or aggression is being directed to. If it's you or the other person, involved that they're feeling frustrated with. Um, But I think, trying to slow some things down and naming, what's happening, like I can see that this is really bringing up a lot of feelings. And let's all pause here for a moment. I don't know if initiating deep breaths would be helpful, but let's pause because I can tell it's bringing up a lot and, there's a lot to be said, but I don't know if hashing that out all right here is going to be really productive. And sometimes naming that tension out loud can help diffuse it. I think if it's being directed towards you, it's a bit different in a way. I mean, you could use the same tactic, but that's probably going to bring up a lot of feelings for you. And that might be hard to, objectively slow things down or be a non-emotional party in it.
Would you
But
recommend saying, Susan, you are being unhinged right now? Or is that a no?
I mean, in those terms, it depends what you want out of it. If you want them
Fair.
to calm down, I imagine they probably wouldn't.
No, probably not.
That I mean, that's valid if they are being unhinged, and I mean, you guys are put in a hard position because you have to be, I'm sure, a lot of times the punching bag because
Right.
and as anyone that's providing a service, you get a lot of flack because there's emotions underneath it, and it's usually not your thing. If you did mess up, that's one thing, but that's also something really easy that can be fixed. But I mean, I think it's also up to you if that's an inappropriate way to be spoken to. If that something like that comes up, be like, hey, this really isn't effective for this kind of conversation. I hear you. I hear that you're upset. I don't think being defensive is helpful or, justifying is ever really helpful in kind of any conversation. There is a certain amount of if you're being totally misunderstood
Mhm.
and you want to clarify, I absolutely did not say that. And I'm so sorry, you heard it that way. I don't think that about you, XYZ. But kind of standing your ground and saying like, I won't be spoken to that way, or that's not a really appropriate way for me to be spoken to. I want to work this out with you, but it seems like right now the tension is kind of high, and it might be best if we pause and, revisit this later when we both can have had some space.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it depends the intensity of the situation.
Yeah.
And I
I
also
only brought that up because I did have to say that to someone. It's a long story. And actually,
That
Carrie,
you're unhinged.
yeah, my unhinged story, but we're approaching the 1 year anniversary of that milestone. And but the communication was abusive. Like this woman was abusive, and I had been verbally abused in front of people, staff, told not that I'm not allowed to eat. Like it was
oh,
wild. And I finally said, you are absolutely unhinged and you need to go away right now. So I cried. Oh my God, it was awful. That
well, it
was
sounds
one.
like the relationship was also already over at that point. You
Oh,
weren't
yeah.
working to rebuild. I think
Right. And it was a one time, it was a corporate client. So why she was so emotional to me is wild because I deal with weddings 90% of the time. So why are you so emotional about a corporate event? I do not know. Like nothing was going wrong. Everything was going great. So it's one of those things. But yeah, at the end of the day, like looking back, I'm like, okay, it wasn't personal. This woman had what I learned later on. There were maybe some substance abuse and stuff like that. Like there was so much deeper stuff that I found out about this person. Not that it never it justifies how you, if you treat somebody like that. Um, but yes, of course, they're in the moment. I do think if everybody's heated, like you said, it's not going to be a good outcome. If everyone's just yelling at each other, it's fueling the fire. But having us be that calm presence and say, I hear you, but how we're handling this right now is not going to be a good outcome. Let's think about this in a different way. Let's have you step away. Let's have us take a few moments to think about a backup plan or whatever situation is.
yeah.
But yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
even just knowing that, not excusing the behavior of, that person you worked with, but knowing that for your own sake, like, yeah, there was all this other stuff that was happening. I can at least recognize that it's not about me. Like, I'm sure there's maybe some beliefs that come up, like maybe I am incompetent, maybe I am all these things that she's saying. Um, and there's a just at least for yourself, that
Yeah.
can be helpful to know that, is happening and it's not about you.
I do feel like one thing I sometimes will offer to clients is like when they're having a conversation with parents who are involved in the planning process and they're like I haven't spoken to the parent, but a lot of times they'll be like, they're just not understanding our perspective or why we're doing this. And sometimes I'm like, I'm open to having a conversation with them because I think sometimes the parent like wants to hear from the professional because we've done this so much, and then they're like, "Oh, that makes sense. I understand." And then they like get on board with something. So I feel like sometimes they just want to hear from someone that's not their kid, or you know what I mean? Because they're kind of like, well, I don't think that's the right way to go about that because like they're not the professional. And so
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like we can just diffuse the situation or the tension by stepping in to have that conversation with them and like give them our professional opinion inside of things and how we typically do these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's awesome if you're willing to do that. And also, I mean, I'm sure I'm just thinking about a financial, financial aspect like, oh, you need to actually start negotiating with the planner. You need to, you can't just accept the first offer, whatever that is coming about with certain venues and whatnot. To hear that from your perspective so that the couple doesn't have to be the middle person relaying all the information. And that's also a nice opportunity for you if you know there is tension or miscommunication or whatever to reorient everyone to the same goal that is like making this a meaningful experience for the couple. And there could be a lot of power in that. Like we're all on the same team and again, like this is the purpose of this, the
Hmm.
wedding.
Hmm. Yeah. Jen, in terms of how planners can support clients who maybe struggle with perfectionism, I think sometimes our clients get really stuck on like, I don't know whether it's like a color combo or like the timing of things, just like they're so worried about it going well, even if we reassure them multiple times that like we've done this, we know how to handle it. How do we help those kind of couples who can't let go of control without feeding into their anxiety? And also for planners who like suffer from perfectionism ourselves. Like sometimes like the couple might be perfectionist and the planner, and then it's just like making the situation worse. How can we, I guess, help couples who struggle with that?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that probably that battle comes up a lot because I imagine a lot of wedding planners are, perfectionists or very attentive to details, and you know, that's that's a strength, and that's probably a skill set that's very well served in wedding planning. But personally, that was something like I had to let go of, confront that belief that I can only do things right. And not even with the people involved in actually planning the wedding, but just friends and family. But I think that, there's so much pressure on this day being perfect. And it's coming usually from that place that like perfectionism is coming from it. Um, there being all these expectations and feeling so much pressure on it. And I think one helpful thing you guys could do is, and I think this is in regards to some of the financial aspects as well, is just zooming out a bit and like reconnecting with some of the things that matter most to them, maybe asking those questions up front. I don't know if that's part of what you guys do or encouraging. This could be one of the things you encourage them to think about together is like, what are a couple things that that are really important to you? Is it the food? Is it the lighting? Is it the customized little like trinkets? I forget what they're kind of called, day of paper, whatever. Um, like what are those things that are really important? Pick a few and the rest, we're going to work on, but if you if you try to control every aspect, it's going to be really, really hard. And I think there's when things get really overwhelming, it can be really easy, especially for, more perfectionistic type of people to like just hyper focus on these small details and make them out to seem like they have really high stakes. And like you're saying, like the napkins or the chairs somehow feel like they're gonna make or break the whole experience, but like asking those questions, what are some of the things that are really important to you and reorienting them to the those things that they actually care about, not all the other stuff, but can help with letting some pressure go on the other details. But I also think, once you guys start to build trust, hopefully that tendency lessens. But
I feel
yeah,
like well, I was going to say too, sometimes in those scenarios where like the client is very type A, and it's funny because Carrie and I just had this episode recently where we realized we're both type B planners. So we're not obsessing perhaps over, I wouldn't say we're perfectionists, at least I'm not. But I have purposefully left clients out of the loop of the itty bitty gritty details of some things because I know that if they get involved in that, it's going to be worse for everybody. Like it's just going to be too much as opposed to saying, here's the vision we agreed upon, trust that I'll make that happen for you. And I think you're right. It's like, what are your top priorities? Great, food is a top priority. We're going to make sure that I, do go in depth in explaining to you how the food, the whole evening is going to be based around food. And there's going to be all these extra snacks and beverages and fountains and things like that. But they do not need to be involved, perhaps, in every little thing about how we chose the toothpick that's going to go into the little club sandwich and
Mhm. Yeah.
for certain people. And I just think it's too much of a headache to have them in that whole conversation anyway.
Yeah. I mean, you'd need a 3 year
Oh my
plus
God.
process to deal with
Seriously.
all those small decisions.
Yeah.
And I think that's helpful. Do you tell people that, there are all these little tiny decisions? And I don't know if not asking it in a way like you should, but
Yeah.
I wonder if that would be helpful or if you do and how that lands.
I feel like there's just stuff that I take care of and I'll
Yeah.
tell my clients I'm taking care of it, but they don't really ask further questions. But I
Mhm.
feel like there's so much behind the scenes that I do that clients
They don't
never know
know.
about because
Yeah.
they don't know to think about it. But I'm also like, why overwhelm them when I'm like, I know exactly how this process goes, whether that's collecting vendor insurance forms, getting them to sign documents, getting their meal, choices and dietary restrictions for their staff. Like things our clients would never think of, but I'm like, I don't need to overwhelm them with those details because then they're going to start freaking out about did I collect that information?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And that's kind of what I was curious about, if that would open
Hmm.
up a can of worms. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's important to like just zoom out. And I know this was something I struggled with a bit, or there was periods, and I'm sure it was related to something where I was feeling really overwhelmed. Um, but when I would be looking, and now talk to clients about this too, is these like line items in the budget. Like I'm about to order some, I don't know, plastic cups for a certain event and they're $300. That's crazy. It's just cups, but it's a lot and whatever it is. But if I drove myself a little nuts looking at the prices of each thing versus the budget, like we're still within our budget,
Yeah.
we're under budget, and that's amazing. So I can't bother myself with all of these things because you will drive yourself nuts knowing that certain things cost the cost that they do. And it might feel wasteful or it might feel frivolous. But you can't get caught up in that because you know, it will drive you insane. So to just zoom out and look at the budget, like, oh, we're on target. That's great. Then I don't really have to worry about,
Yeah.
what these minute things are. I don't have to worry about them.
Yeah.
You said something interesting about when you were feeling flustered or overwhelmed about your wedding planning, you knew that there was also something probably in your personal life that was feeling overwhelming. And I wonder if when our couples start getting a little nitpicky about stuff in the wedding planning process, is it because they feel like this is something they can control? Like they can have a say in ordering the plastic cups or not, or removing it from the budget? Or is it something that they're like, well, it's my day, so I know that if I want the linens to be blue, I can pick blue linens, even though we said they were going to be brown? Like, is that where do you think there's some type of correlation where they feel like this is something, an event that they can come in and control a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It obviously depends on the person and what's going on, but yeah, that is, I mean, it's a common thing that happens when there's like it feels like things are out of control in your world or something's happening that's causing you a lot of distress or overwhelm, a tendency to hyper focus on, something. I don't know if you guys have ever uh like had a really chaotic day at work and you find yourself just like cleaning things, that's kind of the same thing that happens, or reorganizing your closet. That's kind of the same thing because like this is something that I can handle, physically right now actually with my hands, but in that other stuff, this is a bit of a deflection, onto that. That's something I'm going to choose to hyper focus on. So I'm sure that can be part of it for a lot of people, this grasping onto these little things when maybe the rest, there's a lot of stress, happening in their nuclear family with their parents or their sister, or, the feeling disconnected with their partner. Um, yeah, I'm sure it's a lot of time coming from that place.
Jen, you mentioned just like money stress with
Mhm.
couples. And I think money in general for everybody, whether you're planning an event or just life, day-to-day things, like money is like a very emotional thing for people. And not everybody has a healthy relationship with it, right? And so I'm curious if you have any tips for us to discuss budgets with our clients without it like bringing up a lot of stress or emotional experiences. How like I guess with us going into it not knowing how couples feel about money, do you have any tips to sort of navigate that if they start to feel stressed out about it, or like the budget is the thing that they're just like, I don't know how we're gonna pay for this, or like where the money is, like who in our family's paying for this? I think there's just so many conversations around it. So I'm curious what your advice is to help people navigate that and not let it take over every emotion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's such a hot button topic. And, you even mentioning that, like, I don't want to necessarily, or we don't always want to bring it up because it could, or bring it up in a certain way because it could feel really overwhelming. But it is like a fact of the part of the process. And if it's going to be overwhelming, it's going to be overwhelming at some point, And I think that's something that couples do themselves, and it's not your job to fix their relationship with it, but couples themselves avoid, that's one thing I think they definitely avoid talking about more commonly until later on. Or it's like, I'm going to deal with this with my parent and we'll figure that out, but you don't need to be involved. And there's kind of these isolated conversations happening about the financial aspect, and everyone's family structure looks so different, and how people pay for weddings is so different. So there isn't really a framework. It's not like, okay, first talk to this person, then talk to this person, then go see this financial, planner and whatever. Um, but I think that's one of the first things that I talk about with couples that are interested in premarital therapy, even if they're, not engaged yet, or in the engagement process is, and even, my couples that are married and older, or not older, but, more established in their marriage,
Mhm.
is the financial piece. Like, how transparent are you about money? Like, do you guys know each other's financial situations? What's your relationship like with money? What did your childhood look like? What kind of household did you grow up in? Is that something you were privy to or you weren't aware of at all? Because that is so informative of how someone operates with money today. And I think that's a big part of the engagement planning process too, is like, is this financial stress real, or is it an inherited belief? Like, is it real that you actually don't have any money to pay for this wedding? Or do you just kind of believe that because that's how you're panicked around money? You have a scarcity mindset when it comes to that.
Mhm.
So That's hard. It's hard because that's not work that you guys, sh need to do. But I also think talking about it in the early stages, like this is going to be a hot button topic. Um, Whoever the parties are that are going to be involved in paying, these conversations should start ASAP. They're not going to be pretty, maybe, there might be uncomfortable, but you guys as a couple should begin talking about this. Here's, like I kind of mentioned, here's a spreadsheet or here's this resource, there's this podcast, that talks about it. Listen to that. It can help, uh, destigmatize the topic and just being transparent that that's probably a hurdle they're not going to have, or probably a hurdle that they are going to have. And if they're not going to have it, then great, that's one less thing everyone has to worry about. But,
Right.
if you can introduce it in a way and maybe share some resources and also, kind of mention what you had said before, like, I'm happy to have a conversation with your parent if that might be helpful for you, or we can hop on a call, the three of us, to talk through some of the logistics, so I can come from a non-emotional perspective when this might be a really emotional thing for them to talk about.
Yeah.
And you
Well,
at least
not,
give you sound mind.
I would
Something
say,
Gabby and I feel like we always talk about is like a client inquires and they have a budget, and then after they book with us, like the budget changes. And it's whether it's like a prompted conversation from us or like they just do it on their own. But then it comes out to be like, oh, well, so and so, my aunt or this parent's going to pay more than we thought. So our budget is bigger. But I like that of like encouraging that conversation because sometimes for me, even a lot of clients, it's like, well, to my mom, this is really important. So she's just willing to pay for all of that, you know? And it's like, sometimes it's like, oh, you just doubled the budget because your mom came in and was like, I want to pay for that. And
Mhm.
so I think it is helpful and really healthy to sit down and be like, what exactly are you guys paying for? And what are we paying for? So that that weight can kind of be taken off. So we're like, okay, we don't have to pay for the catering because we know you're doing that. So we can focus our attention on other things that matter to us.
well, and the less awkward we make the money conversation, I think that helps our clients too. Like, Carrie, I'm sure you do something similar, but like I always say to my clients when we're getting started, I'm like, okay, for this to work, we have to be super honest and open about money. I said, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about how much things cost. We're going to talk about how much money you have. We're going to talk about how much I cost. And it's like the less awkward. And I tell them, like, be honest with me in how you feel about a certain number when we get that proposal back. Like, are you feeling like this is stretching you? Are you feeling like it has everything that I ever wanted and this is the price? Like, we don't negotiate. There's no haggling vendors. The price is the price. And I'll find you one other quote if you feel like you need to see two, but they're going to be similar. And I think it goes back also to, for us as planners and vendors, to making sure that we're educating clients before they even book with anybody on what the cost of weddings are truthfully nowadays in certain cities or certain venues, because the information you find online isn't always accurate. And but yeah, I think money, I don't know when back in the olden days money became really awkward to talk about, but I think it helps to have a little bit of an icebreaker with couples early on to be like, it's not weird, guys. We have to talk about it. Money is what's making all these people, these vendors show up for your wedding. So we've got to
Mhm.
get numbers.
Right. Yeah, and it'll probably, I mean, it's so great that you do that. And I think just the transparency of it all probably takes a big weight off. And it will probably help you guys maybe indirectly, but in some way if there is a big ticket item that, they're just avoiding discussing because they haven't had the conversation yet with whomever they need to have it with. And you're trying to lock this in because it's important. That vendor might not be available any longer, but this person's avoiding talking with you, like having had them have that conversation with who the parties are, the financial contributors at the beginning would be huge because then they know maybe they could or they couldn't pay for that anyways. So it's worth or not worth pursuing. Um, And yeah, it's it can be yucky sometimes and there isn't a playbook.
Right. Right.
Sure.
Well, okay, as we wrap up, Jen, what would you say are some good like self-care habits or maybe even mental resets that you could recommend for planners who are, unlike Carrie and I, carrying more emotional weight from their clients in the day-to-day. And I will say like it definitely does get to us too, especially when we're in slow season now, but like talk to us in October and we're going to be like we are mentally beat up
Yeah.
and emotionally beat up. So what would you say is something we can do now in preparation and maybe something that we can do in the thick of it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think lots of things. I think like we've kind of talked about, it's it's emotional for, lots of people involved and you guys build real relationships with these people. So when you do maybe get invested or do, have a connection with someone and then they say something insulting or they, undermine you in some way that can really, like you're a human, that can trigger some kind of emotional reaction. So I think, I don't, I feel like it feels generic to give, self-care tips at the end of the day, but really like intentionally figuring out how to mentally transition out of wedding mode at the end of the day with your clients. And like you spend so many hours and talking about other people's dynamics and the details and to consciously shift back into your own life. I think that is really important, whatever that is, if it's like a physical thing, if it's a space in your home. Um, and also, kind of as we've talked about, like it's usually not about you. And so, if there's something you can do to remember that, there's having some separation here. Like you can be invested, you can care, but you are not responsible for every emotional dynamic that's happening. And like, you know, knowing that all this stuff that's going on, these things that are coming out, this like, stream of consciousness email at 1 a.m. is is not your burden to carry. Your stress is not there. Some of it is, I guess, in some ways, because you're working collectively as a team to make this thing happen. But knowing that, yeah, this is not my emotional burden to carry. I think that's something important to remember and, reiterate to yourself in whatever way kind of sticks. I know I personally use a lot of like little little sayings in my head when um, I'm feeling especially triggered by something that's really like not very not something worth me freaking out about. Um, but saying like this is not your fault. Like you're doing nothing wrong here. Everything, is okay. Um, isn't, necessarily a blanket statement to use for everything, but I think that is really helpful. And, remembering that like sometimes the greater the reaction to something that you experience or you're the recipient of, the bigger the pain underneath it. And
Mhm.
so, again, just knowing that it's probably not about you and um yeah, I know that's kind of vague advice, but I as far as in anticipation for it, use your time to relax and to enjoy it. And if there are certain, systems and things that you always get caught up in and like feeling frantic and when you're in the thick of it, yeah, using, that time to build some of those out or gather some resources to delegate some of the issues or whatever.
In terms of from the client perspective, I guess, is there anything that you did during your planning process to like de-stress and just enjoy that chapter of life? And what would you recommend to other couples if you didn't have that?
Yeah. I'll be honest, it was really hard for me. I did try very actively. I think it's important to have like intentional, not wedding, no wedding chat time,
Mhm.
intentional time where you do talk to your partner about the wedding and time where that's just not part of the conversation because it does infiltrate your mind. And so doing that actively and not allowing it to trickle in, I think is important. And I also like there were certain calls and things that I was on just with the planner or just with someone, and I brought in like my sister and my mom and my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law to certain things because I just felt like so much weight of carrying it all myself and having to remember and follow up on it. And so even just having people there with me, like so I just
Mhm.
wasn't the only person thinking about it, felt really helpful. Um, and I think, yeah, I mean, my husband and I did go to premarital therapy, and it was really helpful. And the therapist gave us something, that I remember today, and it sticks with me is like, we were kind of what I was referring to before with like these friendship dynamics that happen and whatever family that you feel like you have to solve and fix. And because there's this important day at the end of the tunnel, and you want them to be there and you want everything to be perfect and tidied up, or and if it's not, you want to know that. But my husband and I were just getting into some of the same patterns that we typically have conflict with, and it was creating some disconnection with us in the wedding planning and just this engagement period. And she kind of gave us permission. She's like, these things are going to be there, after the wedding. We can continue
Mm.
to work on them. We don't have to fix them right now. Like, why don't, like, you two need to intentionally spend time together, like connecting and getting excited, maybe talking about the wedding and all the things you're looking forward to, or just doing something fun. But like, let's not worry about fixing all these things that exist and are going to exist, because we don't have enough time. And that's also not what you should be focusing on, because you guys
Mhm.
are, solid. You should be. It's not like she was ignoring all these red flags and saying like, oh, just wait until after you're married and then we'll like dive into all this other conflict that, exists. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think
I
that's
like
all.
ending that with like, this is, a chapter of your life, but it doesn't have to consume your whole life and like every moment and thought. Like, you can talk about other stuff. You can go out and have fun and do other things and just let this be part of this chapter of life.
Yeah. And that, being what you're protecting is like your relationship.
Hmm.
And if that, if wedding talk is causing disconnection, to actively find a way to reconnect, because that should be the goal, is to protect the
Yeah.
relationship and not like making this event perfect.
Hmm.
No, this is great and insightful for I think we mostly wedding planners and wedding vendors listen to our podcast, but it's great information for them to share and have conversations with their peers and even maybe some of their clients and just be on the lookout for some of these things that they can either set boundaries for or just kind of reframe their own mindset. So,
Yeah.
Jen, if we have clients that desperately need your help, how can they work with you? But also, how can people find you online?
Yes, if they're based in California, I can work with them. Or if they, live here, and they can find me at my website. It's jenottmantherapy.com, and my email is jen@jenottmantherapy.com, and all my contact info is on there. But yeah, the
Amazing.
email is or my website is my current social media presence. So that's
Perfect.
where I live.
Love it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
being on.
Thank you guys. This was such a good conversation, and also gives me a lot of, insight as to where you guys are at. And I have a lot of empathy for the position you're put in, because it's a lot of work and
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of dynamics.
For sure. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Jen, for being here. And I think this will be really helpful for our fellow wedding pros and jabbers. We will be back next week with another episode. As always, you can find us over on Substack. We do weekly blog posts. And also, if you want to become a paid member, you can get a bonus episode from us every month. But for now, we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.